Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 16, How Parikshit Received the Age of Kali, Text number 1. Word for word, Sutta Uvacha, Tataha Parikshit Dvijavarya Brahmanas Sikshya Mahim Mahabhagavataha Shashasa Ha Yata Hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovidaha Samadishan Vipra Mahatgunaha Tata Sutta Uvacha Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasaha Yata Shisutyam Abhijata Kovira Samadishan Vipra Mahagunastata Sutta Uvacha Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasaha Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida Samadishan Vipra Mahagunastata Sutta Uvacha Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya Mahim Mahabhagavata Shasasaha Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida Samadishan Vipra Mahadgunastata Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Sutta Uvacha
Sutta Uvacha
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Shikshaya
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shasasaha
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasaha
Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida
Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida
Samadishan Vipra Mahatgunastata
Samadishan Vipra Mahadgunastata
Sutta Vacha Ta Parikshit Dvijavarya Shikshaya Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasaha Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida Samadishan Vipra Mahagunastata
Sutta Uvacha
Sutta Uvacha
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Shikshaya
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shasasaha
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasaha
Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida
Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida
Samadishan Vipra vipramahadgunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Sutta Uvacha
Sutta Uvacha.
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Shikshaya
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya.
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasaha
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasa.
Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Sutta uvacha.
Sutta Uvacha.
Tata parikshit dvijavaya shikshaya.
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya.
Mahim mahabhagavata shashashaya.
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasa.
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
Samadishan vipramahadgunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Sutta uvacha
Sutta Uvacha.
tata parikshit vijavarya shikshaya
Yata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya.
mahim mahabhagavata sahasyaha
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasa.
yata hi sutyam abhijata kovinda
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
samadishan vipramahadgunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Sutta uvacha
Sutta Uvacha.
tata parikshit dvijasvaya shikshaya
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya.
mahim mahabhagavata shashasaya
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasa.
yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
samadishan vipramaha gunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Sutta uvacha
Sutta Uvacha.
tata parikshit dvijavarya sikshaya
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya.
mahi mahabhagavata shashasa
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasa.
yata hi sutyam abhijata kovidaha
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
samadishan vipramahadgunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Sutta uvacha
Sutta Uvacha.
tata parikshit dvijavarya shikshaya
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya.
mahim mahabhagavata shashasaha
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasa.
yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
samadishan vipramahadgunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Sutta Uvacha
Sutta Uvacha.
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Shikshaya
Tata Parikshit Dvijavarya Sikshaya.
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasaha
Mahim Mahabhagavata Shashasa.
Yata hi Sutyam Abhijata Kovida
Yata hi sutyam abhijata kovida.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata.
Samadishan Vipramahadgunastata. Word for word, Sutta Uvacha. Sutta Goswami said, Tataha, thereafter, Parikshit, Maharaj Parikshit, Dvijavarya, the great twice-born Brahmas, Sikshaya, by their instructions, Mahim, the earth, Mahabhagavata, the great devotee, Shashasa, ruled, Ha, in the past, Yata, as they told it, He, certainly, Sutyam, at the time of his birth. Abhijatako Vidaha, expert astrologers at the time of birth. Samadhishan, gave their opinions. Vipra, O Brahmanas. Mahat Gunaha, great qualities. Tata, true to that. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sutta Goswami said, O learned Brahmanas, Maharaj Parikshit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord under the instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth. Purport. At the time of Maharaj Parikshit's birth, the expert astrologer Brahmanas foretold some of his qualities. Maharaj Parikshit developed all those qualities, being a great devotee of the Lord. The real qualification is to become a devotee of the Lord. And gradually all the good qualities worthy of possession develop. Maharaj Parikshit was a Mahabhagavata, or a first-class devotee, who was not only well-versed in the science of devotion, but also able to convert others to become devotees by his transcendental instructions. Maharaj Parikshit was therefore a devotee of the first order, and thus he used to consult great sages and learned Brahmanas who could advise him by the Shastras how to execute the state administration. Such great kings were more reasonable than modern elected executive heads. More responsible, such great kings were more responsible than modern elected executive heads because they obliged the great authorities by following their instructions left in Vedic literatures. There was no need for impractical fools to enact daily a new legislative bill and to conveniently alter it again and again to serve some purpose. The rules and regulations were already set forth by the great sages like Manu, Yajnavalkya, Parashara, and other liberated sages, and the enactments were all suitable for all ages and all places. Therefore, the rules and regulations were standard and without flaw or defect. Kings like Maharaj Parikshit had their council of advisors, and all the members of that council were either great sages or brahmanas of the first order. They did not accept any salary, nor had they any necessity for such salaries. The state would get the best advice without expenditure. They were themselves samadarshi, equal to everyone, both man and animal. They would not advise the king to give protection to man and instruct him to kill the poor animals. They would not advise the king to give protection to man and instruct him to kill the poor animals. Such council members were not fools or representatives to compose a fool's paradise. They were all self-realized souls, and they knew perfectly well how all living beings in the state would be happy, both in this life and in the next. They were not concerned with the hedonistic philosophy of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. They were philosophers in the real sense, and they knew well what is the mission of human life. Under all these obligations, the advisory council of the king would give correct directions, and the king or executive head, being himself a qualified devotee of the Lord, would scrutinizingly follow them for the welfare of the state. The state in the days of Maharaj Yudhisthira or Maharaj Parikshit was a welfare state in the real sense of the term, because no one was unhappy in that state, be he man or animal. Maharaj Parikshit was an ideal king for a welfare state of the world. Om Agyanatimirandasya Ganajana Shalakaya Chakshurumaditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Translation repeated. Suta Goswami said, O learned Brahmanas, Maharaj Parikshit then began to rule over the world as a great devotee of the Lord under the instructions of the best of the twice-born Brahmanas. He ruled by those great qualities which were foretold by expert astrologers at the time of his birth. So the Pandavas have retired, and now they're leaving this empire under the care of their grandson, Maharaj Parikshit, who was saved by Krishna when he was in the womb of his mother by the Brahmastra thrown by Ashvatthama, the fallen Brahmana. So at the time of birth, we heard before, there's a chapter that we studied that was about the future of this child, Maharaj Parikshit, and in that, so many nice descriptions were told about his qualities, how he's a great devotee, he's going to prosper like this, he's going to rule very nicely. So then they were peaceful, the Pandavas, to leave their kingdom to such a personality. And so this is how this is supposed to work, is that one hands down the kingdom to a qualified son that they have trained very nicely, and that they cannot squander what the forefathers have built up. So for a father, having a son which will squander everything is the greatest disappointment, because the father works so hard for the family to accumulate wealth. He may have his own business, so he builds up this, he's building up his dynasty, so to speak. And sometimes one has a bad son, an elder bad son, and then the elder son just destroys everything, spends all the father's money, puts the business in debt, like this. So this happens. So therefore, one has to perform the perform the purificatory rites to get good progeny, and then one will be more assured that their dynasty will continue nicely. So at this time, these principles were all followed, and what we are hearing about in the purport is the principle of the Kshatriyas actually having a council of Brahmanas who can guide the king how to rule in accordance to Shastra. And we see that if one does not have a basis of Shastra for morality or social things, social issues, then things are just whimsical and changing. But Shastra doesn't change. The principles are adjusted. The principles never change, but the details are adjusted according to Desha Kala Patra, time, place, and circumstance. So therefore, we had 64 rounds to be chanted before, during Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, but now, according to time, place, and circumstance, Srila Prabhupada has adjusted to 16 rounds and no less, and 4 regular principles. So the detail must change, but the principles remain. The main principle is for us is to always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. This is the main principle of our life, of the human life. And the acharyas give the exact remedy how to free us from illusion so that we can actually remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So Maharaj Parikshit, because he was submissive to the Brahmanas' knowledge, he was not proud that, who are you to tell me what to do? You just, you just study, or you just perform these brahminical work, but you're not actually on the front line, actually having to deal with the citizens, right? This might be some pride that a kshatriya may have. But it was a cooperative system, so the king knew that I might not be able to just sit and study Shastra and think about all these things. I might have to be acting, I might have to go into emergency acting mode, just keep, solving issues that arise in the moment. And so then it's important that he has counsel from the Brahmanas. And ultimately it's up to the king to execute the advice, but the counsel is very important to keep the king having some sort of boundaries, so they know, what to do and what not to do. Where is the line where I don't cross going against Krishna's laws, the laws of nature. So this is very important for kings. And these brahmanas, because they were not paid, they were not actually financed, you could say, by the king or by the kingdom, then they were independent. They were free to speak the truth as they wished. They didn't feel any obligation. So then, of course, the king they would give charity to the brahmanas, but the brahmanas were able to avoid any kind of obligations by financial, dependence from the king, so that they could just speak exactly the truth. Yes?
Very nice points. The principles are the same. The Shastra never changes. But as you pointed out, the Brahmanas know how to utilize all these unchanging principles in a situation that comes up. For example, when the Qazi forbid the chanting of the holy names in Bengal, Lord Chaitanya organized civil disobedience, and he went with 100,000 devotees chanting, and they went to the Qazi's house, the whole thing, and it was successful. Lord Chaitanya spoke with him, and the Qazi changed his views and accommodated the chanting. So Prabhupada has also come up against that kind of obstacles, that some of the governments, or many of the governments, were not agreeing with the chanting parties being publicly presented, especially in certain places. It says against their religion, and they're going to proselytize here. And so Prabhupada gave other advice. For example, once we had a similar case in one city, and so we were chanting loudly at a parade, and the police constables forbid us to do that. And so when Prabhupada heard, he instructed us, because he was there in the city, and he said, you can chant Hare Krishna. It doesn't always have to be loud with big instruments. You can just chant. If they object to the kirtan with drums and kartals, you just clap your hands and chant Hare Krishna. And that way, the chanting goes on. So the expert Brahma, like Prabhupada, knew how to adjust according to time and circumstance. the chanting going on for the purification of everything. So, these Brahmins, another nice point, not only were they not salaried, they didn't even have a desire to be salaried. They were not interested. If the government offered them a salary, they would refuse. Because of losses like that. They wanted to be able to be uncompromised in their principles. As soon as someone becomes dependent on another person, another entity towards living, then its principles, one's principles may be compromised. So that's why Brahmanas were independent. They did not work for anybody. They worked for everybody. Because they worked for God. They did what God wanted. God supplied all their necessities. They had no need for taking a salary. Prabhupada so many times said this about today's people. Many of them were born in India and good Brahmin family, upbringing with good living, then they go and get a job in the education. To give an example of a dog, dogs can't live independently, they have to have a good master. And he goes, the dog wags his tail. He's the master. But compared to people who go with their education, their degrees, they wag their degrees, get a good job, they compromise their principles. So it's actually hire a dog, wag their tail, or a dancing dog. So, it's very important that ISKCON has to remain friendly. That's why it can't take some kind of particular issue of social issues. It has to always be free to speak the truth. Even if telling the truth means there may be some statements whereby they threaten, if you don't stop saying this, then you'll do something to you. In that case, so many examples of great devotees who were prepared to undergo such difficulties, such castigation from society, for the right to speak the absolute truth, to give the absolute knowledge. Like Lord Jesus Christ, they wanted him to stop preaching because they felt it was against their state policy. But he didn't do it, and he preferred to take the consequence. And by taking the consequence, he ended up with kind of bodily imposition. But he accepted that rather than to compromise principle. So it was a great responsibility to his movement to be able to give advice to leaders of the greater society. Not compromise our principles, especially in our own behavior, and adjust everything perfectly according to Shastra, common circumstance, so that everything becomes all auspicious.
I think we can. Do you have any comments or questions about these points? So another point here in the purport is that these brahmanas, they were all self-realized souls. They knew perfectly well how all living beings in this state would be happy both in this life and the next. They were not concerned with the hedonistic philosophy of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. They were philosophers of the real sense, and they knew what is the mission of human life. So we see that there is an aversion to having some monarchical system in the U.S. because democracy has been the main championed system, and for the people, allow the people freedom and ability to have a say and to rule. But the point is that can be the blind leading the blind, right? People become elected that are blind, and the blind followers remain blind, and they all basically fall into the ditch in which they die without understanding what the purpose of life is. So there is this issue that we need real brahmanas that can, as the tradition, can give counsel to the kshatriya type of persons, and that they can rule the state, or at least be able to start to make facilities for purification of consciousness of the people. And there are some comments by Srila Prabhupada about if the leaders take it up, then they can make so many people Krishna conscious. And also if the people become Krishna conscious, then they will want Krishna conscious leaders. They'll want spiritually minded leaders. And so we're trying, this International Society of Krishna Consciousness, trying to preach Krishna consciousness to all classes of people, and see how Lord Chaitanya how he will arrange things for this golden age. So for one to simply be concerned with this hedonistic philosophy of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy, one has to completely forget about this interest of what will happen to me after my next life, in the next life, and where am I going? So it's either by the will of their self wanting to just enjoy, or it's by the covering of Maya, or both, right? If one wants to simply just enjoy, then Maya will allow them to, or Krishna will allow them to, through Maya, by covering their knowledge. And they'll just enjoy, but they'll also suffer too, equal amount. And therefore, that's mostly what people are engaged in these days. And the leaders of society are engaged in the same things, hedonistic pleasures of life, and not knowing where they're going after life, or making a solution to the problems of life, janma, mrityu, jara, vyadi, birth, death, old age, and disease. So therefore, everybody is completely confused on what to do in life. There's no real purpose of life other than just enjoy. Drink, be merry, and enjoy. Get as much money as you can, get as much sense gratification. When the body's old and decayed and you can't enjoy so well, just try to squeeze out as much as you can, because that's what you got. And If you're a good person, then you're probably going to go to heaven where you can have even more enjoyment. Now, this is most of the philosophy of people today. At least that's how they live, and that's what they're saying through their actions. So we need real philosophers to wake people up, and to being a real philosopher means one has vijnana, not just knowledge, jnana, or just theoretical understanding of what to do in life, but actually to be examples. That is what a real philosopher is. And that's what the Brahmanas were. They knew Shastra, they lived according to Shastra, and they preached according to Shastra. And so we have to be like that. We have to, and if we want to be effective in our sharing Krishna consciousness and helping others, then we have to get this vijnana. We have to become real philosophers. We have to internalize Guru Sadhana, the knowledge of Guru Sadhana Shastra, and apply it and be an example. And then people will follow suit. People will become affected nicely to do the right thing. And so we can take great inspiration from Maharaj Parikshit as an ideal person to rule over his kingdom. We may not have a kingdom to rule, but we have some realm of influence in our lives, whatever that may be, is different for everybody. But we have some range of influence. So we have to take guidance from Guru Sadhana Shastra, senior devotees, about particular matters in our lives. And then we have to know what is Shastra. We have to also ourselves study and understand it so our mind could be absorbed. And then we clarify with senior devotees, we clarify with Shastra, we check in, and then we apply the teachings of Guru Sadhana Shastra, and then we can actually be effective in positively affecting people in our realm of influence in our lives. So we can take great inspiration from Maharaj Parikshit to be like him in this way. Okay, are there any last comments or questions before we end the class? Yes, Magadhari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
My question is that sometimes we may feel like, oh, Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada, they're empowering this person to do wonderful things. But we feel like, oh, it's not going to happen for me. Does Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada want everybody to do, amazing preaching work by becoming very advanced and inspiring others?
Well, what is the definition of amazing preaching work?
Well, to make devotees.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are devotees which are not necessarily preachers, but they're also pure devotees. But making devotees not just like, okay, I met somebody off the street and now they're chanting 16 rounds following the Four Yoga principles. It's not necessarily, that is bringing someone to Krishna consciousness, but what is this person going to need to advance in Krishna consciousness their whole life and to follow the process? That means they're going to need counsel, guidance, engagements, instructions, So it's not like, we can bring a lot of people to Krishna consciousness, we may be good at that, but we may not be so good at sticking with them through thick and thin, through all their issues, counseling them, helping them advance, So it's not just like a result. It's like, okay, yeah, I made this person a devotee, made that one a devotee, and now now they're good. But it's like they're gonna have to get so much. We're gonna have to give so much to maintain devotees in Krishna consciousness and help them progress. So to do that, one has to follow the process and apply the process very nicely. And then their example and the qualities that they cultivate or that they develop through the process, they can greatly inspire devotees and help devotees continue on with the process. So it's not that just the frontline preachers are making devotees, but everybody who's following. We might meet some devotee who's, who greatly inspires us, but is not on the front lines making so many devotees. But they're making me a devotee because they're so inspiring. They're doing such nice service. They're living as an example of how I could be if I follow this process and advance in Krishna consciousness. So in one sense, that's also making me a devotee. There are like some devotees I know that are senior to me. They're not necessarily, you don't see them like bringing hundreds of people to Krishna consciousness, or, they may have only brought one or two devotees to the movement, but they're making me a devotee because, I'm inquiring from them, I'm asking them, they're encouraging me. I'm asking them the questions, they're encouraging me like that. So, and I need that. So in that sense, I feel like what they're doing, even though they're not bringing so many people to Krishna consciousness, they're still bringing me closer to Krishna and many others too, even that are just within the movement or have already become introduced to Krishna consciousness. So, and we see that the gurus may not necessarily be front lines making devotees, but they're initiating devotees and they're guiding devotees in their lives. So in that sense, they're also making devotees as well. So it's not very black and white. There's a lot of aspects to this mission of making devotees, and everybody has in a community where this is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to develop the consciousness of wanting to help as many people come to Krishna consciousness as possible, making more devotees, making new devotees, making ourselves devotees, maintaining devotees, helping devotees advance. This culture of having being very supportive and caring and nurturing for the spiritual life of devotees and very new devotees that are coming. So that is what we are trying to aspire for here. And yes, so even one who is not necessarily on the front lines making a lot of devotees, bringing them to Krishna consciousness, although that is glorious, and some devotees become so empowered by Lord Chaitanya that they can bring so many new people, which is amazing. And there's also work to be done too on the other part of helping them advance, training them, guiding them, counseling them, like that. So if one just stays in Krishna consciousness, following the process, even if one slips up, apichet sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadareva sama yosito sisa. So even if one falls victim to Maya, but if they continue with their conviction, then they're considered to be saintly still. So even if we have difficulties, if we just continue following the process, then that is glorious in itself. I mean, who could think that with all the momentum for material enjoyment that we have, that we've grown up in this culture, to avoid those temptations day in and day out, that is extremely glorious. That in itself is great preaching work. Just being able to just do that, because what happens from that is that you overcome so many things that eventually you'll be able to share and inspire others how to overcome those things also. they'll think, how did you come? And all the issues arising from that with free internet and everything. How were you able to overcome all of that? So then they'll be able to ask you, and you'll be able to tell them how you've done that for so long. And they'll be greatly inspired. Okay, I can do that too. So Lord Chaitanya's mercy is unlimited. There's no limit to it. And how we affect others, we don't necessarily know personally, but it's happening. And you might just meet somebody, like you might be traveling, to a concert, to a festival, and some new devotee sees you and they're like, somehow become so inspired by you. Like, wow, this is such an amazing person, such a nice devotee, similar background. And, we may not know how we're affecting them, but, that could be a very deep impression for them and could be helping them a lot. So. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. And even the junior devotees, they're also preaching to the senior devotees by their example. We see new devotees, they're so ecstatic in Krishna consciousness, they love everything, kirtan, prasadam, and they're advancing nicely. And then the senior devotees are thinking like, what are they getting, They're so happy to engage. How could they be living like all these, all these Matajis that are coming? They're living outside and they're coming, they're serving Krishna, and we might be thinking like, whoa, they're like giving up some of their activities they could be doing, which they were doing previously, but now they're coming to the temple and now they're giving their time for Krishna. And that's greatly inspiring, right? So they're also preaching like, hey, you should be sincere too. You should, do some nice service, take it as a fresh opportunity to serve the Lord, like that. Okay, so let us continue with our preparations for this Janmashtami festival, and in full cooperation. And we'll have a wonderful class tonight by Nanda Prabhu, and tomorrow we'll start our Janmashtami festival. Shri Janmashtami Mahotsava ki jai.